YouTube friends, welcome to Mom's Greek Kitchen, the channel where I teach you my mom's Greek recipes in her honor. Today we're making Greek spinach pie, Spanakopita. Spanakopita. The accent's on the ko. Actually today we're making Spanakopita, which are the appetizer size, but the same filling is used in the entree or the appetizer. It's just the size that you make them and the way you fold them in your phyllo. So spinach, feta cheese, lots of the allium family, onions and leeks and green onions, and another aromatic which I will talk to you about later. So let's get cooking. Okay, so now we're going to start our spinach filling for our Spanakopita. So I'm going to be doing half a batch of spinach triangles because I'm also going to do half a batch of cheese triangles with my pound of phyllo. So I'm going to show you half a recipe, but the full recipe is what's on the recipe card at the beginning of this video. So I have 2 bunches of fresh spinach here, and the easiest way I find to get the spinach ready is to keep it in the wrap or the tie that it's got when you buy it, and just slice it across into like 1/4 inch strips, 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch strips, until you get up to the tie, and then go to the other side of the tie and keep going until you get down to the stems. And the first 1/2 inch or so of stems is fine. And the rest I just pick up and throw into my compost. And then the whole thing goes into one side of my sink that's full of cool water. And if I miss anything, I just chop that up. And I will take out the tie. And I will do the second one the same exact way. And give it a good stir around. Now the other side of my sink is also full of water. So what is happening is the dirt sinks and the spinach floats. So by doing this a couple of times, transferring the spinach from this side into the other side, it will leave all the sand and dirt behind. And we do that 2 or 3 times until there's nothing showing on the bottom of your sink. And then your spinach is nice and clean, and then just throw it in a colander or a strainer, and we will proceed from there. So while I adjust the camera, you're going to get a little bit of a jiggle. But there you see I have the spinach on the other side. It's floating in water. I will drain this side, put fresh water in, and transfer over. I'm going to do that 2 or 3 times. This is actually very clean. There's very little of any dirt on the bottom, so I may only have to do it this once more. Alright, so I will do that and I will be back. Alright, I've rinsed it one more time, and now I'm just going to take it out of the water for the last time and just throw it into my colander and let it drain for about 15-20 minutes, and then we will proceed with the next step. Alright, here's our spinach. It's been chopped, it's been drained, rinsed and drained, and now we're going to salt it. So I'm going to use about a teaspoon of salt, and then I'm going to get in there with my hands and I'm going to squeeze and rub a little bit until the salt is distributed evenly to the spinach, and this will help to pull the liquid out of the spinach so that when we, after it sits for a few minutes, we'll squeeze it and it will be a nice dry product for us to use in our little appetizers, because if we don't do it, they will be very wet. As you can see already, a lot of liquid is coming through. It's already collapsed a little bit. We are going to now let it sit for about 20 minutes to half an hour or so. It doesn't really matter. and then we will squeeze it. Alright, and we'll be back. Alright, another ingredient that we're going to use in our Spanakopita is leek. And I don't know how many of you out there have ever used leek. It's a member of the onion family. It looks like a very large green onion. However, it is much more fibrous. We cannot use these dark green leaves. So the first step we're going to do is between the light colored green and the dark colored green, we're going to cut a staggered pattern up through our leaves. This one doesn't really have a lot of light underneath. There's some there. And I'm just going to cut that because we're only doing half a batch. Like I said, I don't really need all of this leek, but I was showing you how to clean it. Now, when you look at a leek, it's sort of football shaped. It has this shape runs through the entire thing, but when it gets to the coarser part, you can't really tell. It looks round here. But if you cut the leek through the point to the point, the inside of the leek will be all separate layers. There will be nothing that crosses over, which makes them easy to cut into little half moons, and then we'll wash it and make sure there's no dirt, because leeks grow in the dirt this way, and to keep the nice light green color they keep adding dirt into a mound, and that can sometimes get between the leaves, and so if you don't wash your leek you end up eating sand. So line it up so that your point is top to bottom, and slice through your leek, and the other way. And so now you can see it's all separate layers, and we're going to slice it this way and throw it into our colander. As you can see, there is dirt. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, you can. So there's dirt all the way through between the layers, and we're just going to chop it and wash it, and we'll proceed with our next step. So we're just going to slice across, again pretty finely. Alright, so as you can see, they're fine little half moons or strips. We're just going to throw it in the colander, run lots of cold water over it, and then we're ready to proceed with the next step. Alright, we'll be back. Alright, our next step in our filling is we have our leek and our white onion that's been finely diced in a saucepan. In this case it's half an onion and half a leek because I'm doing half a batch. And then we're going to add enough water just to come up to about the same level as the vegetables. And we're going to bring that to a boil. And we're going to boil it for just about a minute, just until they're a little tender. This will help them be nice and tender when we make the filling, because they really don't cook all that long. And so we don't want crunchy bits of onion and leek in our finished product. So I will be back when they are done to show you the texture. Alright, we're back. It's been about a minute or two. Our onions and our leek are cooked down. As you can see, they're tender. The leeks are no longer holding their shape. And that's basically all that you're looking for. I'm now going to take them off the heat, drain them, and allow them to cool. And we'll be back for the next step. Okay, so we are ready to start working with our spinach. As you can see, there's a lot of liquid. So you have two options here. One is to just grab a handful of spinach and squeeze. And squeeze. And squeeze some more. And there's our finished product. Relatively dry. It's not sopping in liquid. and it will be part of our filling. Now, I find that actually very hard on the hands. So another trick is to take a nice clean kitchen towel and a strong fabric. You don't want one that's been worn and very old, because you will rip right through it. So you grab a handful of the spinach, and you can get a double handful using this method, and wrap it up and twist. And as you can see, let me try to get that in the camera, it just rains out of there. And you just keep twisting and squeezing. And as you can see already, it's a much firmer product than hand squeezing. So this is my preferred method. It's easier on the hands, and it actually gets you a drier product. So I'm going to continue until it's all done, and we will be back with the next step. See you soon. Welcome back. We're ready to start making our filling. We have our dry spinach here that's been well squeezed. I'm going to add the leek and onion that we have parboiled just to soften a little bit. Here I have some green onion that have been finely sliced. Here I have our feta cheese that's been put through the large side of a box grater, or you can crumble it between your fingers. I just like the fineness that you get from the grater. Here is our cottage cheese or ricotta. It doesn't really make a difference, and since cottage cheese is cheaper, I always go with the cottage cheese. A couple of eggs. A good sprinkle of black pepper. You don't probably need salt in this because you've salted the spinach and the feta itself is slightly salty, so that will probably be enough. A drizzle of olive oil. And now for the aromatics. You have two choices, dill or fennel. Those are the main flavors in Spanakopita. Our family has always used fennel. In Greek it's maratho. And the Greek version, or the plant that we use, does not make that big crisp white or pale green bulb that the Italian finocchio or fennel bulb makes. It doesn't make a big root ball like that, and it's used mostly for its leaves like you would dill. So we grow quite a bit of it, and when it's ready in the summertime, I cut it down, I chop it up, and I freeze it because it freezes quite well. And we prefer this flavor to the dill, and dill you can get pretty much any time of year fresh, but you cannot get fennel anywhere. So I'm using fennel. If you cannot find fennel, dill is a good second substitute, but the fennel is much nicer in this. It goes really well with spinach. It has a slight licoricey, aniseed, ouzo-y type flavor, but not that pronounced. And it takes quite a lot, either dill or the fennel. That's your real flavorings. And don't chimp out on those. And so now all I gotta do is mix that all together. You can, in a pinch, use dry dill. I have made that when I used to work in restaurants. You don't always have the fresh herbs in some of the restaurants. And in most of the restaurants I worked in, we never did the fresh spinach. We always used frozen, and then we would thaw it, squeeze it out, and chop it. It's a little bit of a mushier texture in the final product, so I prefer the fresh, but in a pinch, the frozen does quite well. Alright, so that is our filling. So now I'm going to set that aside and pull out our phyllo and get ready to start making our Spanakopita. Alright, we are ready to start working with our phyllo. So phyllo is a very fine pastry. We use it for things like spanakopita, tiropita, galactoburrico, baklava, etc. etc. One can make this phyllo at home, and I will probably be showing that in a later video. I do have a more rustic version of a phyllo on my YouTube channel, but for our purposes we're going to use this today. So you want to have it out of the fridge for a bit, or in the fridge. They come frozen for the most part. You want them to thaw before you use them. So either overnight in the fridge or about an hour or so on the countertop. And they tend to come wrapped in like a parchment paper or wax paper. And you see the different sheets here. If you unwrap it to the middle, and you pull the middle, you see how it staggers. That allows you to know where the center is, and so when you pull it apart you don't have to go and try and find where the middle is. Now there's about 18 sheets in a pound of phyllo, depending on the manufacturer. It all has to do with weight, of course, so depending on how thick they roll their phyllo depends on how many sheets you're going to get. Now this one seems to be sticking to its outside, so I'm going to carefully peel that back. So here we go. Alright, so for tiropita and spanakopita, Mom used to divide it into 7. I like dividing in 6. First of all, it's easier, and they are slightly bigger. Mine are about 2-3 bites. Mom's were about a bite and a half, so 2 bites. So it just depends on what you like. If you want to do 7s, you're going to have to get out a ruler and stuff, or be really good at eyeballing things. I like 6s because it's just so much easier. If you're doing like a dinner size spanakopita or bugatsa or whatever, you would be cutting your phyllo in half, because they're usually made bigger than what we're doing now. So I'm going to take the first sheet, top sheet, and I'm going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to cut what's left in half. Now you can use a knife or a pizza cutter. Both of them will do the same work. And then I will take the one that I cut on top and I will slice it down the side. If you break it, it doesn't matter, because you will be layering it anyway, and you just layer the broken one with ones that are not broken and it will work out just fine. Come on, alright. And then I'm going to take the top one that I just cut, or any of them really, and fold it into thirds. Trying to get sure that, or make sure that they're all about the same width. And that's going to be my template for cutting out the 6s. I will cut 3 strips across each half. Take my template, put it over to the next one, and cut it again. We're ready to start assembling our spanakopita or tiropita. Today I'm making spanakopita. So the first thing I do is I have a container, a pot of melted butter, and a paintbrush or a pastry brush, and I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on my countertop. You can do on a cutting board if you like, or whatever. And the reason I use that is it keeps the dough from slipping around. So you take 1 strip of the phyllo, and starting at the bottom, finger on it, lightly brush away. If you try any other movement, your phyllo will move around. So again, we layer a second one on top. Same process. And one more. And that's a standard for the tiropita and spanakopita, these little triangles that I'm going to be making. You can do 2, but they don't really have any bite, so to speak. And if you put too many more, it gets too thick in the phyllo, and they're really crumbly, and you're actually wasting phyllo, because 3's ultimate, really the ultimate size. We're going to take a teaspoon of our filling, about this much, and you can basically come up with, we do triangles. So you're going to lift up the, in my case, the right hand corner, because I am right-handed, and I will bring it up so that it's even with the side of the phyllo. And I've already got the shape of my triangle that I want to make. I'm going to take the bottom point and I'm going to go straight up. Now I'm going to flip it along the long end and then straight up, and keep alternating. So side, up, side, and then when we get to the end here, depending on how thick your filling is and or how long your strips are, you may or may not have an end that needs to be dealt with. In this case, my end is a little long, so I'm just going to flop it underneath, and there's my triangle. Now you'll have to have a baking sheet handy, and you're going to brush the baking sheet with your melted oil, or sorry, melted butter. And depending on which kind of triangle you have, you're going to arrange them so that they take up the least amount of space. So if I'm using the isosceles, I want it this way, so the other one will go this way, and I got squares. If I'm going to be using the equilaterals, I'll be doing it this way so that they line up that way, but I'll show you that in another video. So right now I'm just going to put them on here, and the last step is to just brush the whole thing again with a little bit more of the melted butter, just so it doesn't dry out. Okay, that's the basic process, and we just repeat over and over. Hi everyone, I'm back. I've finished folding our Spanakopita. I got 31 out of that batch of filling. I'm now going to saran wrap them and foil wrap them, and I'm going to freeze them. I don't need them right away. They are a great appetizer to have on hand. You freeze them and pull out what you need and throw them on a baking sheet and cook them from frozen. They actually work better from frozen than from fresh. It gives us time for the phyllo to get nice and crispy while the filling thaws inside, whereas if you cook them from fresh, sometimes they burst and they make a mess of the baking sheet and stick and everything. So I actually prefer them from the frozen state. So that's what I'll be doing with these ones. I will cook some off to show you what they look like, but I already have some frozen, so I will be using them actually. So I will be back to show you what they look like when they're out of the oven. So our Spanakopita are out of the oven. They are nice and hot. They are crispy. They're flaky due to the oil or the butter that we put on each phyllo layer. Remember, this is the phyllo cut into 6 strips. You can get slightly smaller if you cut your phyllo into 7. I like this size, first because it's easier to cut, and I like the larger size. I can smell the aromatics, I can smell the feta. I've taken this to many functions, and I'm always told it's the best Spanakopita they've ever tried. So I hope you try it, and come back for another recipe soon. Have a good night. Bye bye.